Welcome back again. Now we're having a presentation on the Narratives from Zimbabwe project, the first of the two. We're going to have the presentation by Mr. Nigel Munyati and Mr. Munyati Morovi. Enjoy.
Thank you, Constance.
Thank you.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, in Theatre in the Park, and those also watching remotely. Welcome to the Narratives from Zimbabwe presentation. What is Narratives from Zimbabwe? The Narratives from Zimbabwe project is an idea that we conceived in that time, we were actually looking at how the film festival was evolving. The film festival has been going for 21 years now. So at that time, it was probably 18, 19 years old. And we had primarily been focusing on international films, many of which tended to be Western, and sometimes Eastern in the sense of being Asian and so on. And we felt that there was need to start focusing on the African narrative. For far too long, we've always had to rely on the Western sources for knowledge about our history and our heritage. So we thought, from a creative perspective, we could start to play our role in educating not just Zimbabweans, but the world in general, about the need to start telling our own stories as Africans. For far too long, other people have been telling our stories for us, and it was time we changed that. So we came up with the idea of a Narratives from Africa theme for our film festival, and I think that was in 2018. The theme for the Zimbabwe International Film Festival was Narratives from Africa. We felt that that was quite successful to the extent that we decided that we wanted to take it to the next logical stage, which was now to look at narratives from Zimbabwe. We needed to start telling stories from home because there weren't enough stories being told about our history and heritage from Zimbabwe by Zimbabweans. You know, when you look back, you movies like King Solomon's Mines, etc., which were basically stories of the white man's adventure in Africa. And we were playing a very secondary and subservient role. And that's just one. But there are so many other examples of stories. If you were to go to Hollywood, you know, The Lion King, it's talking about African animals, and yet with an American accent. You know, again, it's Americans telling their own stories, but using us. And we needed to start creating a new mindset change where people in Africa and beyond would start to think of making films as Africans for Africans. The closest that Hollywood came was through Wakanda. That was really the one time where a story was being told about Africa with a slightly more positive view of Africa and Africans. So it was a good start, but it really wasn't us. We still needed to be, telling the stories ourselves. So what we did was, we were fortunate to get funding from Culture at Work Africa, which is an EU-based foundation. Again, sometimes that might seem like a contradiction. Why are we using donor funding from the West to produce stories that are now basically trying to put to an end the influence of the West? And you'd be right in questioning that. Why are we using donor funding? But the problem was it's been very difficult to get local funding. Fortunately, things seem to be changing. And I'm going to ask you, Munyati, to just talk about that. that there seems to be a wind of change blowing through Zimbabwe right now in terms of government starting to pay attention to the need to fund the creative sector. Would you like to talk about that?
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Mnyati. No, absolutely. I think coming from where you just mentioned Wakanda, Black Panther, that did something the world over, amongst Africans, but also the world over. And I think we can see it right now, subsequently now, in government right now, that there's a bit our stories and our history at the forefront, or to bring it to people's attention. I can see that in our generation at large, my generation in particular,
not mine.
right? We we're starting families, we've got young kids, and suddenly now there's a question of, okay, well, what are our children consuming? That wasn't there before. 10, 15 years ago, it was standard that children are consuming content from Cartoon Network, Disney Channel, and movies from Hollywood, right? The growth of Netflix has changed all of that. And you can really see that people are questioning. There is a hunger, right, for content that speaks to us and that's been created by us, right? So, and with platforms like Netflix opening up where we can actually very high standard, and in order to do that, this material then matters, right? The research, data to a certain extent, right? And that kind of material that then informs and gives the flavor, the spice, the themes to the stories we want to form, right? So, yes, the hunger is there. I can see a confluence of, business, government, as well as society at large, that's really saying, you know what, there's a need for this. So that's what makes this so important.
Thank you. And, so one might ask, why ZIF? What gives you the right to want to claim, to make, or to promote the production of, creative content on behalf of Zimbabwe? And the filmmaker is respected. The problem that we tend to have in our culture sometimes is that the filmmaker tends to be looked down upon. I know there's a few filmmakers here, I'm sure you will agree with me. I always give this example when I'm talking to, people in the corporate world that, as a corporate entity, as a corporate person, you have a company that's maybe struggling, maybe your sales are low or your image is poor. What do? You go to your ad agency and you say to your agency, can you do something to make me look nice, make me look sexy, like make our products acceptable so that our sales go up? The creative agency doesn't make the films themselves. They go to find a film, makes the short film or the advert that once flighted will make that company look good or make their products more attractive to the market. And, well and good, they've done very well, thanks to the ad agency, so they think, and they don't realize that behind that is that filmmaker, that individual whom created, the images that have made you look good. Because the next thing is that same filmmaker needs a loan to produce a film. And they'll go and see the bank manager from the same bank that's just had its image improved and its product, perform well. Now, this guy comes in to ask for a loan, and the bank manager is like, oh, look at the way he's dressed. He's wearing sandals and he's got dreadlocks. I'm sure he's even high from smoking ganja. I can't risk my money with this filmmaker. Now, that is the reality that we're dealing with every day. And we're hoping that, that is not the dynamic film culture that we want. We want the kind of dynamic film culture where the filmmaker is respected. Imagine a Steven Spielberg walking into a bank manager's office and asking for a loan. I mean, probably doesn't happen, but assume that it was to happen. The bank manager would fall over themselves to give Steven Spielberg money, isn't it? So how can we close that gap? for Zimbabwean filmmakers, such that, our bank managers and other corporate executives start to respect us as capable members of society. So that's what we mean by a dynamic film culture. We want to create that awareness and that respect for the filmmaker. So our mission as ZIF is to promote imaginative storytelling and sustainable innovations in filmmaking, distribution, exhibition in Zimbabwe and beyond. So that's where we come from. And that's why we decided that getting African stories, and more importantly, Zimbabwean stories told in our media by the creatives is something that is most needed in Zimbabwe. And that was one of the roles that we felt we could play. So, okay, let's go back. Having done all of that, we now have some funding. What did we do? We created the Narratives from Zimbabwe project. It was basically a simple story, or a simple format, whereby we were going to go around the country and speak with our traditional leaders, our chiefs, and talk to them about the origins of their people and the heritage of their people. Because the two critical things is understanding our heritage. Where did we come from? Our history, rather. Where did we come from as people? And then also, what are the things that make us the people that we are in terms of our culture, etc. So we went around, and I'm going to ask Munyat to talk about that a bit, because we worked together. He was our production manager, and was directing the activities in the field. Would you like to talk about that?
Sure. Okay, well, as you can imagine, I think for the entire team, and I think I can speak for the entire team, that it was quite an experience. One that, you don't know as a Zimbabwean how much you don't know about yourself until you actually travel around Zimbabwe. And starting off with the chiefs, there's such a citadel of knowledge and information, right? And also those around them, because it's not just a single chief. He's got his own people around him, herdsmen, people within the community, or elders, should we say community elders. All of these have got information.
Indigenous knowledge experts.
Yeah, knowledge experts, indigenous knowledge experts. And so for us, as we were going through this process, you suddenly realize the magnitude of the work that you're doing, because this previously was done by, Westerners, right? The former colonizers who came and they told us about ourselves. But now you're hearing it straight from the people themselves. So of course, that puts a fire in your belly. You want to document these stories, you want to document them well, and you want to get as much as you can with regards to insights, and not just things like chronological history, and that kind of thing. But there's little insights that we hope will also come out when this material finally comes out, that will make Zimbabweans themselves be like, wow, okay, we didn't know this, So it was an experience. And I guess as we go along, I will drop some of those, gems in there as well.
Very true. And in fact, I think that was one of the most fascinating things about the experiences that we had going out into the field. In that even us and me as the elder of the group, I learned a lot, because there's a lot of things about me as a Zimbabwean that I did not know, and only learned, as we went along, whether it was about certain traditions. I'll tell you one very interesting one. I went wearing a red shirt, and we had traditional leaders, the spiritual leaders all around us, and the chief eventually had to turn around and say, you can't sit around here wearing red, and it made me look silly, realizing that I was actually disrespecting certain key aspects of our culture. I ended up borrowing a jacket from someone else and putting it on. And I know there were a few ladies, some of whom are in the audience, who were wearing pants. And again, you know, you can't go out there in front of the elders wearing a dress, you know, it's taboo, and so on. And, you know, sometimes that's when you realize, wow, we've been, you know, brainwashed for too long. I don't know if brainwashing is the right word, but we've been living a different life, more Western than African, you know. But, you know, those are some of the very interesting experiences. Now, let me tell you about how we approached it. We had a two-pronged approach. One was the field work, where we went out, sat down with chiefs and other, you know, indigenous knowledge experts on film, the narratives from our people. See, part of the problem that we have as Africans in general, but I think it goes beyond Africa, there are other nations as well, we have the same problem where we have not been recording our history, our heritage enough. Our knowledge tends to be passed down orally. And whilst it's entertaining and so on, it's not sufficient. If you're not recording it, you're going to lose it. And that's what has been happening to us as a people. A lot of our knowledge has been lost because we have not recorded. And if an elderly person passes on, which is natural in life, they're taking away with them a lot of knowledge that will be lost forever because no one took the time. Because it's also important to read and learn what has already been done by others. Sometimes, you know, you might end up, you know, duplicating work unnecessarily. But at the same time, you know, it's also important to do your own research. And, you know, well, fortunately or unfortunately, a lot of that was written by our colonizers. And as they say, you know, a lot of the history that was written about Africa and other parts of the world was about the white man's adventure. So it's not necessarily 100% correct. There are also things that they added in to make themselves look good or to make the African look bad. So we are reading history and other written material written by the white man for their own consumption. Not necessarily for our benefit. So we still have to do it, and the idea was to then try and match what is written and what we were being told by our elders from their experiences and the knowledge and the history that is passed on orally. The one thing that we found is always unfortunate is, you see, our oral history does not take into account dates. And sometimes you would find that when we're talking about some of the things that are spiritual and some of our, you know, leaders, sometimes, you know, these people will have lived for over 200 years and you're like, wait a minute, that's not possible, you know. And sometimes you only realize that from reading what has been written, you know. So these are some of the things that we are hoping that we will be correcting as we go along. Experiences, you know, Mutede, Ramakate, and I know one of our colleagues from our partner organization, Zimbabwe Heritage Trust. Actually, there are several of them here that worked with us on the project. What was your experience? What was your feeling as we went through that process?
Well, okay, so just to give background, Terere Makate is in Mutoko, right? And it's where basically the father of the Shumba clan, shall we say, right? Neoreka, right? Is said to have lived. He's said to have gotten his bride. There's a wonderful story behind that, and the bringer of rain and so forth. So it's a powerful history that's around the Mutoko area. And essentially, it gives perspective. Because when we were there, it's interesting because, as Mr. Munyati said, is you're trying to also, whilst you're going through this process, you're trying to also take into account what's been written concerning particularly the Munumtapa Empire, and you're trying to kind of get a context, right? To say, okay, Nehoreka at that time, where was, the Munumtapa Empire, for example, right? What was going on there, because as it is said in the oral history, Nehoreka would traverse the entire country on lions, right? Now, we didn't know this. We're listening to these mythical stories of how he would do that. He would stand on top of huts and, direct wars and so forth and so forth. So you start to understand that to those people who are telling us this history, this is very, very real, and it's very, very alive. And they were so happy to be telling us that this is their history as the Mujia people, right? Now, I think for us, and for me in particular, you start understanding that this is very, very important work, as well as trying to really get the best, with regards to all of the details. And then hopefully filmmakers, writers, artists can then take that material and give their own rendition. So I think on my side, it's more of just listening to the stories, and really saying, you know what, this is powerful stuff, it's powerful information.
It is. And the other thing that makes it even more so is that there are the physical structures that are there, that you see, that we all take for granted. Terera Makate, I don't know how many of you have been to Terera Makate. It's a spiritually engaging space that you are in. You realize that this is a revered place, and you can't just be treating it like, just walking down the street. And not far from that, you also go into, Gambarimwe Cave, which was an amazing cave. You climb, I think it's easily 400 meters,
400 meters, yeah,
up a hill before you get to where the cave is. And you get there, it is a huge, it's bigger than the space we're in now, and it has amazing paintings, and you just wonder how they did it, because some are so high up in the
4 or 5 meters up.
Yeah, and you wonder how did they manage to do all of that. What you find depressing is that a lot of it, you're now getting graffiti as well. You're now getting people going there and painting and writing over that without realizing that this is our important heritage. We have to work at preserving it. The Department of National Museums and Monuments has responsibility for them, but right now I don't think they're covering all of these interesting tangible heritage sites that we have out there. Now, I realize that we're actually running out of time, and we'll need to, speed up. What is the end game? Why are we doing this? For us, the end products that we are hoping to get out of this is that we will create all this content and store it in a digital archive that can be accessed through a website, and again, Mnyati may want to just chat about that. This would be the sort of place where, your creatives, they could be filmmakers, it could be writers, actors, theater producers, they can go to that resource and get the stories that we're writing about, and then take them and then extend those stories creatively. How can you now put your creative touch on those stories to make film?
We want this digital archive to be quite interactive and very, very engaging. So these are our stories, and really the approach is, as we split Zimbabwe up into its various regions, and within those regions, we've got the various people which have their own clans and totems and so forth. So a content creator can really go in now and sort of, from a macro level, go all the way down to micro level, which will basically be a community, for example, a particular chief, who is in Mashonaland West, for example, right? So, and on top of that, we want to then give the background as well of the Bantu migration, because Zimbabwe's migration is part of a larger migration, which is the Bantu, right? And in it, there's a context that was going on, it's socio-political, right? All sorts of things were happening at that point, religious and so forth. And we're really trying to place Zimbabwe's narrative now to say, okay, within the greater region, this was what was happening. And then within Zimbabwe, this was what was going on. So it would be quite big. I mean, it's a lot of information, but chunks that are easily consumed and very engaging as well. Yeah.
Yes. I put that there just to tease you, because I don't know if you can read it. But basically, one of the things that became the foundation of the Narratives from Zimbabwe project is the acceptance that we are all products of migration. I will repeat that. We are all products of migration. If you were to go back to your home area, your rural area, and talk to your traditional leaders and so on, you will find that you're always told that we came from somewhere, isn't it? We came from somewhere. Some of it could be as esoteric as when they talk about Guru Square. And Guru Square is some place that no one can really pinpoint where it is. And that is because it happened so long ago that no one really has the actual facts, the details of where Guru Square was. But basically, it comes from, this matrix is about we the Bantu. The Bantu, we originated in the Nile Valley. Now, there are all sorts of theories about how was the Bantu created, how did we get to be who we are. And I won't go into that now. There's a lot more detail that would take a long time. But for those who have interest, tomorrow, we are screening what we're calling the Chigwedere tapes. Most of you would know about the late Aeneas Chigwedere. Was a well-known academic, historian. He's late now, unfortunately, passed away. But we were fortunate enough to interview him 2 years ago. And we're going to be playing the full interview that we had with him. And he's one of the strongest proponents about the origins of the Bantu. So I'm not going to go into it. If you want to find out more, you can come tomorrow and watch that. But essentially, we started off in the Nile Valley and then came down to Guru Square, which is basically an area somewhere around the Great Lakes in East Africa. That's where we came to. And from there, now this is a process that took maybe 10,000 years. It didn't happen overnight. It took that long because when you've got thousands of people migrating, it's always difficult to all move in large numbers at the same time. There are so many things happening. There are children being born, women being pregnant, and cannot travel, so you have to wait for maybe a year or two before you move. And before you do that, there's a war, and so on. But one of the key things that forced people to move was war. There would always be an invasion or fighting of some sort, and people would then move on. Or you would have droughts, and again, droughts, and also overpopulation. That would then force people to separate and find greener pastures and move on. So progressively, people move down. Now, it is said that 3 groups of the Bantu crossed the Zambezi into the area that is now Zimbabwe and beyond, going all the way down to, the Cape Coast. It's said that the Tonga were the first ones to cross around 300 AD. And then they were followed by the Ziva, or the Hungwe people, who came through around 800 AD. And then around 1000 AD, you had the Sokombire Mtapa people that came down. Now, I can tell you, if your totem is not covered here, you are not going to be happy about this, right? You'll be like, no, we were first, and so on. But nobody knows, and I won't even argue. If you decide that you disagree, that's fine. But if it makes you want to go and learn more, then I've done my job. That's what we want, to get people to go out there. And you'll find that we've been trying to do that. You know, we've been running the smartphone short film competition, which is, I think this morning they were screening some of the films. The idea was we wanted young people to go home, to go to their rural areas, talk to your parents, talk to your grandparents, and talk to other elders in your community. You know, it's amazing that we take things like that for granted. And I'm talking about children, but most of the adults don't even know that. And I think I'm challenging each and every one of you here. If you don't know your origins, please go and find out. And I'd like you to send me a message that says, yeah, I did find out, and my ancestors came from this and that place. That would be wonderful. But anyway, that's the story for another day. We'll then go back down, rather, into how we got to be where we are. You know, the first arrivals went down to Mapungubwe, which is northern South Africa. And from there, they migrated back up to Great Zimbabwe, and this started this Great Zimbabwe Empire, which lasted. Then from there was a split, where one group under Nyatsimba Mtota went all the way to the north, up to the Zambezi, the area we now call Mbire. The other group under Torwa, or Togwa, went southwest to in the area that we now call Kame, and so on. And they became the two foundations of the states that were in existence. You then had the Mwena Mtapa Empire up in the north, under Nyatsimba Mtota. And in the southwest, you now had, under Togwa, the foundations of the Rosri Empire, which became one of the, successful state of Zimbabwe under Changamire Dombo. So, you can then follow that down where, after that, those empires also went through a cycle. Empires always grow and then they eventually die. So the Mwene Mtapa Empire eventually died, and the Rosri Empire took over, which also was quite successful for maybe 200-300 years. And then also died as the Nguni started moving. That was another migration now that came from the south, which was part of Mfecane, where the strife that the blacks or the Bantu in southern Africa were now also facing from the invasion of the colonialists. So they were forced to move up, and that's how the Ndau nation was created, because prior to this were either the Kore Kore or other Shona groups who were then basically overrun by Soshangana and the Ngoni people, and created the Gaza Empire, and that's how the Ndau became the Ndau. And then on the southwestern side, that's where Mzilikazi came in, and also basically eventually overran most of southwestern Zimbabwe, and even went as far up as Zambezi. It's just that they didn't stay there, they would always raid and come back. But that is what shapes the landscape that is Zimbabwe today. And we can't deny it, whether we like it or not. I know some people who want to politicize certain aspects, and to us, it's not that important. Just knowing who we are and how we got to be is what is important. Because we also want to talk about the Portuguese. The Portuguese played a very important role in shaping the people of Southern Africa. In fact, they came before the British. We always think of the British as, the ones who came to Southern Africa first. It wasn't them. It was actually the Portuguese, what was it? Vasco da Gama and Bartholomew Diaz and all those guys when they circumnavigated Southern Africa and then came in. They found here we had what was called the Swahili Arabs, which were Africans from East Africa, but who were partly Arab because of the influence of the Arabs who had also been trading with the East African coast. So those are the things that shape us today. We've gone past our time, but these are the things that I find very exciting, and I hope what we've been talking about has also piqued your interest in learning a little bit more about yourselves, who you are, where you came from, and so on. And the thing is, what I find fascinating is that the minute I got to learn more and understand more about the fact that I came from somewhere else, then it makes me realize that it would be a nonsense for me to want to say to someone, you are not from here, because I'm not from here either, right? We all came from somewhere. And that's the lesson that I would like to leave with you. We all came from somewhere. So let's respect each other and learn. Take the time to understand and learn a little bit more about each other. There's much more stuff we can look at, but we've run out of time. But this is something that I'd like to just dwell on this a little bit. For the creatives, this is now the creative side of using the information that we are gathering. I talk about the granite people. Did you know that in Zimbabwe, we have over 300 sites of shelters built from stone? Like your Great Zimbabwe is the one that everybody knows. But there are so many other smaller, stone structures around in Zimbabwe, in Botswana, in northern South Africa, and even in Mozambique. There's a place called Manyikeni. And the thing is, you don't find any such structures across the Zambezi going north. There's a reason for that. That is because the granite, the particular rock that you find in Southern Africa, is unique to Southern Africa. I mean, you will find them elsewhere in America and other places like that, but within the African context, you don't find it in Zambia, for example, or in Malawi, and that's why they did not build in stone. They used other stones, but not the granite. So, in a sense, we are the granite people. We can claim that. Say, we are the granite people. So you could actually start writing a story, a documentary about granite and Zimbabwe, for example. I call this one "Gimme Shelter." I'm borrowing from, is that the Beatles? Or one of those. They used to have a song called "Gimme Shelter." But again, caves played a very important role in the lives of our ancestors. As shelter in the good times, you would go and hide, in the caves. And I've been into caves, and you should all look for them. Like if you go to Matobo, ask the people there to show you where the grain bins are. Has anyone seen a grain bin? It's one is seen, but many of you haven't. There are some caves where you'll actually find bins that are like that high, shaped, circular, where they used to store grain. Because if you're now being attacked, and you could be, out there for maybe months, maybe even years. So you'd need to make sure that you've got sufficient storage of food. So they used to carry all their food and store it in the grain bins. It had a two-pronged benefit. One was to feed you while you're hiding, but secondly was to make sure that whoever is invading you will not find food to sustain themselves, so they can't stay long. They can only stay for a while and move on. So it was very interesting. The Sun Gallery, I've already talked about it. All the sun paintings that you will find, lots of different places. Even here in Harare, these young men here, at their house, they have rocks where you will find sun paintings. That's how, fascinating it is. But they take it for granted. Just some paintings.
Well, now we don't. Yeah, absolutely.
The tree of life, the baobab tree, it has sustained our people for millennia. You can use the baobab tree. In fact, I see someone has got a drink from baobab powder. It's now a source of food. It used to provide shelter, and you could use the bark for clothing. So it's really sustained us during those times. And then these are very interesting stories, which are rather disturbing in a sense. One is what I call weapons of mass destruction. Many of you may not know this, but had the colonialists coming into Southern Africa not had what they called the Maxim machine gun, or the Nordfeld machine gun, or the Gatling machine gun, they would never have colonized us. But they had these weapons that were so effective in subduing our people that is how they managed to overcome us. It is not just in Africa. If you go to the Americas, they use them again to subdue the Native Americans. In North America, the Aztec empires and all of that in Central and Southern, they managed to control us. So this is a very important story that one day, I hope a filmmaker can write a script about. And finally, the empire strikes first. This is, I quote Cecil John Rhodes, justifying colonizing us Africans. He said, "I contend that we're the first race in the world, and that the more of the world we inhabit, the better it is for the human race. Just fancy those parts that are present inhabited by the most despicable specimen of human being." That's us, despicable specimens of the human being. What an alteration there would be in them if they were brought under Anglo-Saxon influence. If there be a God, I chose the map of Africa British red as possible. Cecil John Rhodes. So you can see how they justified killing us and taking from us what belonged to us. And this is something that we need to know. We are gladly going on and thinking that, these white people are very nice people. Yes, up to a point, but there was a time when they were not, when they were killing us and taking what belonged to us. And again, for filmmakers, you can actually make some very interesting stories through reenactments. There are stories that have been written about all of this, about great Zimbabwe, Nyatsimba and Torwa, how they fought and how, they separated, one going to create the Mwene Mtapa Empire and the other one going to create what eventually became the Rosary Empire. And Father Giancarlo Silveira, most of you don't know about him, but you know about the place called Silveira House. He was the first Jesuit priest to come into the Mwene Mtapa Empire in 1506, I think, or something like that. And he started to convert the Mwene Mtapa and his family into Christianity. They didn't like that, and eventually they killed him, which started a whole crusade by the Portuguese to come to the Mwene Mtapa Empire to discipline the emperor and his people. And that's how they started to come even in larger quantities. And Changamire Dombo, sex, Dambarare. Now, I know for a lot of you this doesn't make sense, but there was a time when the Portuguese, between, say, the 16th and 17th century, they established feiras, or fairs, which were the markets. That's how they came in to buy gold from the traditional or from the local miners, and they would bring in beads and other ceramics that you now find if you do archaeological excavations. So they had actually started to take control of a very significant part of this country until the Changamire Dombo decided, no, enough is enough. He came, and you know where Dambarare is? Does anyone know? It's a place called Mount Hampton, which I actually find very interesting, that we're building a new parliament and we were calling it Mount Hampton. And yet it used to be called Dambarare, you know. He came and basically he destroyed the place. He killed all the Portuguese, and from then on he started this crusade to eliminate the Portuguese from the area that we call the plateau, the Zimbabwe, the Highveld kind of. So he sacked them all the way down to the Indian Ocean. And it took them, I think, a good 200 or so years before the Portuguese came back. Now that's stuff that we need to tell stories about. You know. And then, you know, much more recently, in this context, you know, Mvukela, they like to call it the Mutede revolt. This is when the British were now based in Bulawayo, and the Ndebele revolted against that, and it ended up with you know, the massacre at the Shangani Patrol at the Shangani River. We also had the Mazoe Patrol, where war broke out at Alice Mine. Alice Mine is again just past Mazoe, and that was the first war. That was where the war started against the British colonialists. Underneath that, you've got Chinengundu Mashaya Mombe, who's my ancestor. You know, he fought in the Mondoro area, a battle against the whites that lasted for so long they had to bring in reinforcements, and eventually committed suicide rather than be captured. You know, he committed suicide. He died in the cave where he was fighting from. So again, these are the sort of stories that we need to be talking about as creative people. You know, and it's not just filmmakers. You could be writing books. You could be creating theatrical performances and so on. So I think on that score, oh yeah, he was talking about, you know, Fupajena, Neoreka, and so on. These are stories that could make very interesting animation for kids. You know, the fact that someone used to ride lions, you know, across the country. You know, when he gets to where he's going, the lion is tired, it leaves it there, takes another one and rides to somewhere else. You know, imagine how our kids could be excited by stories like that. And it just requires us to be a little bit more creative and proud of our own narratives. So I think, Munyati, I would like to end here, but maybe you want to say a word or two?
No, absolutely. I think just to close off, I think for me the biggest interest was, again, not just the history in terms of chronologically what happened, but insights, right, that tell us about who we are. As Mr. Munyati was saying, just to take you back on the granite people, for example, it is absolutely not by accident that Zimbabwean stone sculptures are as good as they are, right? It's something that we've, as in modern day society, doesn't look back at and say, wait a minute, but where did this come from, right? How is it that we got so good at stonework, right? To the point where, you know, a lot of researchers with, you know, colonialist philosophies completely dispelled the fact that Great Zimbabwe was built by Bantu Zimbabweans, right? Yet we have such a history, and as he said, that over 300, right, granite, stone living areas, right? Yet someone can stand there and actually say that, no, they could never have built this. You know, and for me, those are the insights that matter. The baobab tree, right? It's been a superfood. We knew this before COVID, right? And only now is it being spoken about as, no, the baobab contains your complete nutrient profile. But this is something that we knew, and its history. Just imagine the amount of indigenous knowledge concerning plants and roots, right? Yet, I was speaking to Shona now that munagabata midzi, now it's like, my God, ameno Zhuwao, But these roots and these leaves and these seeds have got qualities, health qualities. So I think to just close off, insights are what matter concerning who we are as a people, and they help us see who we are correctly. And I think that's the most powerful thing, and then we can tell our stories more accurately. Yeah.
True. True. We actually have run out of time. We didn't even talk about the intangible heritage. Intangible heritage is the other stuff, the stuff that you can't touch, but you can feel. And the important things about them, things like this symbolism, we take it for granted. Have you ever wondered why, water is so important to us, that in certain cultures, when you arrive, before you even ask of their health, when you're greeting somebody, the first thing you do is you give them water, isn't it? Why is that? There is a reason. The circle. Why is it that our homes are secular, our fires are secular, we sit around in a circle? There is a reason for that. That our, traditional chiefs and our kings used to wear way back. The circle, it extends to the sun, to the moon. All those are an extension of the concept of the circle. Why is it that important? But in itself, why is the sun important? Why is the moon important? The chevron, some will call it the snake-like pattern. Why is the chevron so consistently used by all cultures in our region? There's a reason for that. Some will say it's a sign of fertility, the continuation, So there is a lot that, we can learn. Then there's also, our customs, our totems. We are also passionate about our totems. I was here, maybe 3 Fridays ago, and there was a lady who was singing here, and she had this song about totems, and each time she mentioned a certain totem, people would jump up and, but, it's quite interesting how, in fact, the younger generation are taking it up even more so than in the past, But it's all about bloodlines. This continuity of your people, the continuity of your bloodlines is very important. And then we talk of the language, how we communicate, spiritualism, our religion. Did you all know that the word Mwari predates the Christians coming into this part of the world? We already had Mwari. But when the Christians came, they took it over and made it their own. Something for you to think about, So yeah, I think I'll stop here. I could go on for another 2 hours just talking about this, because it's something that fascinates me. It's something that I'm passionate about, and it's something that I'd like to share. I'd like to infect you with that passion. If I can get a few more of you today walking away feeling more passionate about who we are as a people, our origins, our heritage, and so on, I will have made a very significant achievement. So I think on behalf of the young men, Munyati, and myself, I'd like to thank you all for having come here in person, and for those who are watching remotely for having given us your time. I wish we could show you a lot more. There's a lot that we can share with you, but that's what the digital archive is going to be for, so that you can visit the digital archive and learn a lot more. Thank you all, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.